Hello and welcome to the Politically Speaking podcast. I'm your guest host for today, Jason Rosenbaum. Chris McDaniel is on assignment. Joining me in studio is
Joe Mannies.
And our very special guest,
Mark Harder.
Member of the St. Louis County Council, the newest member of the St. Louis County Council, Republican.
From the Ellisville area?
Baldwin.
Area. Let's not insult
District 7.
Let's not insult him by conflating Baldwin with Ellisville.
No, wait a minute. It's not insulting. There's
I know.
a lot of the county that's very nice.
I am kidding.
Ellisville's very nice.
Yes.
Just before we get into who you are, just kind of explain what your district is.
Well, the 7th District is basically west of Hannah Road all the way to the county line, and from the Merrimack River on the south to the Missouri River on the north.
Now, isn't the 7th District like the largest geographically of the seven
so.
districts?
Because
it
includes
gigantic.
It includes Wildwood, which is a huge municipality. It includes Baldwin, Ellisville, most of Chesterfield or all of Chesterfield.
About 90% of Chesterfield, Baldwin, Ellisville, Winchester, the Wildwood area, Eureka, and a little bit of Valley Park.
Now, isn't the district actually larger than the city of St. Louis? I mean, territorial rise. It's huge.
No, I don't think it's that big, but it is large. It is probably the largest of the 7 districts, but the population is the same as the other districts.
Correct. It used to be even bigger geographically wise before there was the population.
But basically, if you live in what we colloquially call West County, Councilman Harder likely represents you on the county council. So tell me a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, and how you got into politics in the first place. Because before you won this office last year, you were on the Baldwin City Council. But let's start at the beginning. Like, where are you from? What kind of path did you take to politics, basically?
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Normandy, Missouri, and went to CBC for high school because that's a St. Louis thing to do. You got to find out where you went to high school.
Yeah,
Joe didn't even have to ask where you went to high school.
I know.
Amazing.
I asked the questions and answered them at the same time. Went to CBC, graduated in '79, and then graduated from University of Missouri St. Louis in Normandy in '83 with political science degree and business degree from that university. So I know that area quite well, and I had my first job in that area working in a grocery store. And then after college, went to work for a number of different businesses here in St. Louis. Worked for Wetterau Incorporated here, worked for Merritt's. Then I went out on my own as a real estate agent and became a real estate broker in Chesterfield with Berkshire Hathaway Alliance.
Now, one of the little vignettes that the councilman told us before we went on the air is that while you were at UMSL, you were there's actually a conflict of interest here, that you were actually a newscaster at KWMU.
For this very station. Is that true?
I think so, for about 3.5 hours.
Oh, my.
That was the extent of my career. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I think I was fired by 5.
Oh, man. We're all about disclosing our horrible secrets here on the Politically Speaking podcast. So, I guess you settled in the Baldwin area, or Baldwin. How old is Baldwin as a municipality? Isn't it a relatively new municipality?
Well, actually, it's one of the oldest.
Correct.
When you go back, way back, when you looked at Manchester Road was a plank road and a dirt road in a farming town. It goes back to the late 1800s.
Okay.
Schrader Funeral Home is the oldest business in Baldwin, and they were a funeral home back in the 1800s.
Now, the reason I thought it was new is Chesterfield and Wildwood are relatively new municipalities. So I just made a very gross assumption to think Baldwin was in that same category. But continue.
You're not from St. Louis, are you?
I'm from the Chicagoland area, but my dad grew up in Chesterfield in the 1960s when it was farmland. So I know a lot about West County, actually, but apparently not enough. So,
Sure. Well, and Baldwin and Manchester both are very old communities. Farming communities go back to, as we said, back to the 1800s. Wildwood was incorporated, used to be unincorporated St. Louis County, and became incorporated around 1999, maybe.
95-ish or so? 1990s,
I confused them with Chesterfield, which was back around that same time as well. And both of those were unincorporated St. Louis County. And at that time, that was becoming a boom area. And I think the people at that time, I was not around, but from what I've heard, is that the people of that time wanted more control over zoning, development, and other issues, and to go to the St. Louis County Council on every little issue from snow plowing to zoning to building permits, everything else, the people felt that this would be a good opportunity to try to incorporate.
And interestingly, a lot of people in South County are kind of dealing with that situation right now, and that's kind of spurred some kind of loose talk of incorporation there, though whether that actually occurs remains to be seen.
Yeah, because I covered the County Planning Commission in the late 70s, and there was all these proposals, most of it for West County. And I remember the controversy was when the proposals would be for 3-acre lots instead of 5 or 10-acre lots, and people were getting all exercised. Of course, then within 10 years, all of a sudden their proposals were for 1-acre lots or less. But this was when the West County, the boom area before the incorporation started, when Chesterfield and Wildwood were just little names.
But we could probably delve into incorporation politics for a long time. But when did you get elected to the Baldwin City Council, and what prompted you to run for that?
I got elected in April of 2011 and ran as alderman, and I saw an opportunity. We were having some issues with some development, and mostly in my ward, over a grocery store at Kerr's Mill and Clarkson Road, and the people in that area felt they were underrepresented in that discussion, and it was a rezoning issue from a residential to commercial that back to residential, and to put a big business like a grocery store on this property they felt was an eyesore. They felt it was, it's going to have noise problems and all the things that go along with commercial development next to a residential area. And the board at that time was pretty divided. We went through a number of different aldermen that quit. It was just kind of a mess over this whole issue.
And, did the grocery store get the zoning or not?
Yes, it's now a very large store. It's one of the smaller of one of the chain stores here in town. And
Schnucks or Deerbergs?
It's Schnucks.
I live really close to a Schnucks and Webster, and I gotta say, I'm at that store all the time.
And this was a hybrid prototype store that they wanted to put up. It was actually smaller than a normal Schnucks. They wanted to be more specialty, more boutique type of a grocery store, and that appealed to some people. But the people that have to see it every day and deal with it and traffic, and of course everything is taken to the nth degree when it comes to new development, what it's going to be in the future. So I got elected. Now, when I got elected, it was already coming out of the ground.
Right.
And so I told the people there, they wanted me, hey, can you stop this? And I said, no, we can't stop it. But what we can do, and what I can do for them, is that we can make your life easier when it comes to the way this is built. Mm-hmm. So myself and Shamed Dogan, who is now state rep, we were both aldermen at that time, and we decided we'd help them out with fencing, landscaping, making sure the lighting was not intrusive on their property, that the hours of operation were limited, that they were accepting deliveries in off times and not, at 2 o'clock in the morning, that kind of thing. Anything we could do to make it easier, and that seemed to work with those folks.
So let's fast forward a couple of years. Greg Quinn, who was the councilman for the 7th District for, 20-plus years, announces he's not running again. You're one of 3 candidates that decide to get into the contest. One, I think, was the former mayor of Baldwin, Walt Young.
Walt Young, yes.
Yeah, and the other was the current mayor
of Ellisville, Adam Paul, who gained kind of some notoriety after being impeached and then coming back into office. So that campaign is a situation where you win the Republican primary, you win the election. It's a very Republican district.
Correct.
What was that campaign like? You were kind of on a different level from city government, but you're kind of running against these 2 other city officials. What was kind of your experience running for that seat?
Well, that's the first partisan race I've ever ran and won. And so we're looking at other dynamics. You're looking at raising a lot more money than a city council race. You're looking at much more time involved and a lot more territory to cover, a lot more people to talk to, and as I say, hands hands to kiss and babies to shake. But they a lot more, involved in that type of a race. And so it brought out some sides. Some people took sides when you're in a primary. But I think I got most of the endorsements of the sitting Republican either candidates or incumbents at that time. And I've been very involved. They know me. People in the area know me very well, and they know where I stand on issues, and I'm conservative, and it seemed to work.
I kind of got a sense in that particular race, the city-county merger issue kind of came to the forefront, like who could be against it more, essentially. Because I know that
Right.
Adam Paul was kind of his campaign plank of being against it. I got a sense that you weren't really that warm on that idea either. Is that a fair assessment?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say I came to the forefront before some of those candidates did concerning the city-county merger, or the proposal thereof. So I've been out there and been involved, and it became the issue of the campaign. And like you said, I think it was like who can be more against it in this case. And it seemed to ring true with a lot of voters in the area. They felt the same way.
So is the opposition to a merger per se, or, the basic proposal now is to have the city re-enter the county as just another municipality. Do you think most county residents are against that as well?
I think they see that as the same side of the same coin from that standpoint, whether it's a merger, which isn't going to happen.
Right.
To a re-entry into the county.
And a merger, these words are interchangeable, but one of the ideas
But
that was
they're
brought
different.
up, they're different.
Yeah, there is
a re-entry with the city becoming a municipality is a lot different than what I like to call the Tony Messenger plan, which melds all the cities into one mega city, similar but not exactly similar to what happened in Indianapolis, because there were municipalities that opted out. And one
Two
of
or
the
three.
And one of the reasons I don't think that'll ever happen is if you take the logic that Chesterfield and Wildwood incorporated 20 years ago because they didn't want to be unincorporated anymore, those are going to be cities that are not going to be for ceasing to exist, essentially. And Baldwin would be in that same scenario. But be that as may, we're talking kind of about reentry at this point.
But I think what's interesting is that in the 80s, the late 80s, this was actually a Republican idea to have Gene McNary was the county executive at the time. And he had the boundary commission was set up, and his proposal was to at least reduce the number, get it down to maybe 37, 38, I think was the final number.
And that didn't really succeed.
No, it didn't succeed in some things that may have hurt McNary down the road. And of course, he'd been county executive at that point for about 15, 16, for a long time. Mm-hmm. Why do you think, as I said, it was sort of a Republican idea at that time. Now it's maybe a Democratic idea because of the mayor, or at least of St. Louis, trying to get re-entry, or is it just something that is just just not going to happen for anybody? Is there a particular view that you have on what might or might work?
Well, and again, I was against any merger or re-entry. Now, I would say that I am in favor of issues where we could save money, where we could maybe eliminate some duplication of services.
Like the Economic Development Commission?
Yes, economic development. One of the first items that happened a number of years ago was the Metro Air Support out at Chesterfield Airport, which is in the 7th District.
Right.
That, combining the air support of Jefferson County, St. Charles County, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and so that they could go after better grant money and get surplus equipment and so on and so forth. And that seems to have been a very good move when it comes to that. And I'm sure there's other instances between the two governments that we could work on in those areas. It's unfortunate that we spent all this money on a huge crime lab in St. Louis County and didn't think about that at that time. Why couldn't we have had maybe a regional crime lab?
Right.
That would have been much bigger. It could have been maybe done more economical. It could have been, a crown jewel of the police of the region. But instead, we have two crime labs, and that's something that's being used every day. And there's a backup of years in that crime lab right now.
So you ended up winning your primary. I guess we wanted to get rid of the spoiler alert there. It was actually a pretty close race, but you won.
I got 45% of the vote in a three-way race.
Yeah, which is pretty good.
Which is good in a three-way race. And then you've actually spent a lot of time at the county council before you were inaugurated, kind of getting a sense of what you were getting into procedurally. And during that time, it was probably some of the most tense, chaotic, and controversial county council meetings of the last few years, mainly because the fallout from the Michael Brown shooting was coming basically to the county council's doorstep. I'm interested to hear what your impressions were as an observer of that and kind of what you felt you were seeing from basically the audience during that time. You weren't in office yet, but you were kind of observing what was happening.
Well, as you know, there's no training manual for this job. And so going to these meetings I felt was a good way of learning procedures, like you say, and finding out what are the issues that they are dealing with. And without Ferguson, it would have probably been pretty boring at some of these meetings, as you know, the things that they deal with on a regular basis. But with that, yes, it was very much of a surprise, and anybody that attended that, they didn't know what to expect. We've never been down this road before, at least in my lifetime. And so this is a new path for both the county council, the media, the people in attendance, and some of those meetings got pretty crazy. I know when I came home, my wife knew more about it than I could tell her because she saw it on the news.
Was there ever a point where you were like, what am I getting myself into? I mean, I've jokingly asked that to Sam
Sure.
Page several times, but did that cross your mind at all?
A little bit, but people need to be heard, and this was their way. It was kind of a safety valve, I think. People need to be heard. They've tried multiple different means. Sometimes they were heard, sometimes they weren't. And I think sometimes there was a number of different messages, number of different messengers, and some of the message I think that got heard the most were from people that were concerned citizens that had a plan. They weren't there to scream and yell and to chant. They had a 5-step plan or a 10-step plan to solve some of these problems. And I think that's where we need to be in this discussion. I think we're past the screaming and yelling, or should be, and we need to have people that will step up and have done their research and say, these are the 5 things we need to address, or these are the 10 things we need to address. And we've met with our neighbors, and we've met with other people, and we want to move this ball down the field,
Now,
so to speak.
Just for our listeners, the county council does not have direct control over the St. Louis Police Department. That's done by the police board. They have limited authority over municipalities and municipal governance.
Very limited.
Very limited, if not non-existent.
Unless it's a municipality that contracts with the county
on something
for the county police
or something
to
else.
provide law enforcement.
So keep in mind when I ask this question, I'm doing this knowing that as a councilman or as council people or even as the county executive, you don't have a magic wand to solve a lot of those problems. But what, from your brief tenure on the county council, you've been on there for 2 weeks or so, what do you think the county's role is going to be in kind of moving forward from the Michael Brown shooting?
I think the county council, and I guess more specific, the county executive can be a catalyst to move things along. They can be the person or organization that brings people together and tries to address some of these issues. Like you said, there's not a lot of legal control, so to speak, over any of these groups in any of these municipalities. That's where it's got to start first. That's the grassroots. And it's got to start at the Ferguson Council. It's got to start with the Ferguson Police Department and then branch out from there. And when it comes to those issues, or if it's somewhere else in the county, it needs to start there first. The county can be a provider of extra services if necessary. If you remember from some of those meetings that we went to, the county approved emergency funding for, I guess you'd call it a disaster relief for people up there that needed things. There was over $1 million appropriated for that. You have things like the Children's Service Fund that can step in and help, in these kind of situations. This is all uncharted waters. I mean, we've had tornadoes and earthquakes and other types of natural disasters, but we've never had anything like this. The St. Louis has been a relatively calm city since the 60s, and even that it was limited. So we've never been here before. So this is to come up with, we got to do this or do that. Well, we don't know yet. Things are too new.
Now, how do you rate how the county council and county government has dealt with the Ferguson issue so far? Now, obviously, you've only been in office a short time, but you were at the meetings. Do you have a sense of whether or not the council could have done more, or maybe could have taken a different approach, or do you think, things went as they should?
I think they probably went as well as they could under the circumstance. Like I said, we've not been down this road before, and I think the people that came to those meetings were looking for the next highest authority in their minds who could do things. They were frustrated maybe with what was happening in Ferguson, or maybe they skipped over Ferguson, thinking they could come to St. Louis County and somehow we'll do something for them or make things better overnight. And now we see the same folks that were there those first nights are now going to the legislature and trying to have their grievances heard there, thinking that something on a bigger scale can be done. I think, I'm not, just from my observation, I would not say, I don't know if there was a plan, other than just listening to people. And when you had 13, 15 speakers at a meeting screaming and yelling and cursing, the board basically just took it. They sat there and almost stone-faced and took the abuse.
There was literally profanity. He's not exaggerating.
Right.
Now, one of the interesting things about this, and I've had some officials say this, is that for all the attention, national, international attention, on what happened in Ferguson and the surrounding areas, that the whole incident, the whole issue could have very easily been referred to as like the St. Louis area or just like in St. Louis County. Instead, it's Ferguson. And, the name. And that actually it made it so that the region maybe didn't get as much negative publicity as it could have gotten because some people don't understand that Ferguson is in St. Louis County.
Conversely, I had been to Ferguson multiple times before the Michael Brown shooting, and I had gotten the impression, while I'm sure it had some issues, it was a reasonably well-functioning municipality. It's a large municipality that had, a burgeoning commercial district. And the interesting thing was there was so much focus on Ferguson City proper during this entire thing. I tried to say, well, a lot of these things are happening in other municipalities too, probably to a worse extent. So it was kind of an interesting thing that you mentioned right there. So.
Yeah, because it is. I have relatives who live up there, so yeah, it's interesting that kind of how it became this international. Slogan. Hashtag, its own hashtag.
But let's kind of transition to the new county executive. Steve Stenger was inaugurated a couple weeks ago. But from talking with you after you were inaugurated, you were pretty optimistic about his tenure. Tell me a little bit why.
Well, I think change is good. We've been under a different administration for over 10 years. And if you want to add in Buzz Westfall's administration into Dooley's, we've been under somewhat the same administration for maybe 15 years.
Well, more than that. If you're using
how far back you want to go?
Well, Westfall's 89, so
90. Yeah. So
or the early 90s, I think.
90 is when he got elected.
Yeah, continue.
So from that standpoint, we have this is a full sea change when it comes to St. Louis County government, and I think that's good. Whether it would have been a Republican like Rick Stream, who I supported, or it's now Steve Stenger, change is good in this case. And there's a lot of things coming out. There'll be probably a lot of good things that we'll see, good people that he'll appoint, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to do.
Were you surprised that he named Quinn as the head of the Department of Revenue, and that Quinn, who's a lawyer, took it, and then one of the top aides to Colleen Wassinger is another Republican on the council.
Is basically I don't want to say he's the chief director of operations, is a pretty substantial job.
Correct.
So basically, Stenger kind of turned this idea of appointing his political allies on its head a little bit, because he picked two people who were from the opposite party who probably supported Rick Stream and gave them pretty important positions within his administration. No one could really accuse he's picking like his, Democratic political allies in that situation.
A sort of mini version of Team of Rivals.
Something like that. But yeah.
And I think that was a good move. I think that in trying to shrug off what's happened in the last 15 years, we need more, a diverse group of political thought, as well as a diverse group of knowledgeable professional people that have worked in government a long time and have come up with a good resume on what they do and how they can do it, and they've been very faithful to the idea of good government. And a lot of the things that go on in the county government are not Democrat, Republican.
Yeah. Apparently it used to be a lot more partisan, but now, and we've kind of touched on this on the show a couple of times, but now it's become more, less partisan and more, whether you support county executive or not, essentially.
Well, this is more like, I would say, in the 80s, even when McNary was county executive and later Milford, H.C. Milford, and then, frankly, most of Westfall's tenure, whereas they were Republican or Democrat, but frankly, their actions weren't that much different.
Because one of the reasons why I think the two Republicans on the council they shouldn't, on paper, it's on a 5-2 majority, the Republicans should be in the wilderness. But the reason why I think that they have more sway and influence is because, at least in the last county council, Quinn and Wassinger teamed up with Stenger, O'Mara, and Dolan on a lot of issues and were able to block Dooley on some things. So conversely, if Stenger wants to do something that's going to arouse the opposition of Hazel Irby or possibly Sam Page, we'll have to talk about where he aligns next week. Yeah. You and Councilwoman Wassinger may be decisive votes on some potentially controversial things. So it puts you in a nice position, potentially.
And for a potential situation, as I say, most things that happen on the council are not Republican, Democrat. And I think we're even going to see more so a difference between good government and bad government. And I believe Executive Stenger is all for good government. I think he's witnessed what things can do on the other side, and I think he's tired of it. And he did team up with Councilman Quinn and Wassinger on some good government issues, and I think they see that as, a way of him going forward in this new job.
Were you surprised that Quinn took the job as Director of Revenue?
Yes and no. Greg is a very competent I wish I could say that easier, competent individual. He's got a very successful law firm, both him and his son. And he's been around county government longer than anyone in that building almost. And he's seen the ups and downs. He's seen ideas come through and go out. And that type of institutional knowledge, I think, is needed, especially when so much of the upper management of St. Louis County is being changed. You need some anchor, I think, in the mix.
Now let's kind of deal with one specific issue that I think the council could be hearing about in the next weeks, months or so, and that's the Rams situation. Now the county currently pays, I think, about $6 million every year to pay off the Edward Jones Dome bonds. I could be off a zero or two. But now this new proposal that kind of came out last week, the proposal is basically to build a completely new stadium. And the idea would be to, quote, extend the bonds, which instead of them expiring after 10 years, I guess they would go on in perpetuity, essentially.
Another 10 or 15 years.
It's kind of a way to say that there's no new taxes, but clearly there's going to be more tax dollars expended than was previously suggested under that plan. First of all, what's kind of your impressions of that? And two, you were at the council meeting last night where Tom Sullivan suggested that there should be another vote on this. What's your impressions, and do you think the county will have to vote on this if this ends up happening?
County voters, a countywide vote. Correct.
Well, I'm not privy to all the details on this. I will say that from what I read in the different publications, that I think the population of the St. Louis area, both city and county, are not very excited about a tax increase for this project. I think there's some bad blood concerning the Rams.
Because they haven't been that great the
right.
last 10 years.
And this would be kind of a reward if you don't put a good team on the field, and then we're going to build you a new place where you can not put another good team on the field. I mean, those don't go together. And to then add the third level of that is, and we're going to finance it for you through tax increases or whatever it may be.
So you see a bond extension as essentially a tax increase, essentially.
Well, I see it as a real estate agent. I kind of looked at it this way. It's kind of like taking a home equity loan to buy a car.
Yeah.
Where in this case, we're taking a home equity loan to buy a car dealership. When it comes to the amount of money involved here.
Although on paper it's a smaller percentage, of the total price, that it would cost than it could have been.
But he's right. And I know I was listening to it, and it's been couched as, well, we're not going to raise taxes. We're just going to keep going what you're going on. And it's, I think, hotel taxes. But still, if the contract that you signed hypothetically was for 10 years, and then you're saying, well, we're going to do it for another 30 years, it's more money that hypothetically could be going toward other things, tourism related or something like that, essentially.
I'm sure the current dome and the convention center will need renovations. Everything over time needs renovations.
Yeah,
so
I think
it could be used for that,
yeah,
which brings in more revenue for the city of St. Louis.
So you're basically wary
like
of this proposal.
I guess if it involves a tax on the people in St. Louis County or St. Louis City, for that matter, I would be against it. If they can come up with other sources, which it sounds like they're trying to, from the NFL, from other sources out there, other investors,
and about half of it
PSLs and things like that, that's where probably it should come from. These are investors. If I was building a radio station, I wouldn't want the government to come in and loan me money to build that radio station. There should be enough in my business plan, and there should be a market for my product that I know that if I invest a couple $100,000 or $1 million in a radio station, that I'm going to get my money back.
Do you think there's value in St. Louis having an NFL team?
Oh, I think it's from a tourism standpoint. I think we need to have an NFL team, whether it's the Rams or not. That's to be seen.
One of the arguments for it, or for some sort of plan, is that it raises the city's cachet, so to speak, and makes it more of a top tier city if you've got an NFL team. That's what some are saying. Now others say, well, look, San Antonio doesn't have a team and they're a top tier. But I'm interested in kind of your take on that, on what impact it has on other economic development or other efforts in the region to improve the region.
Well, I think it's critical that we have some type of team. And I think it's unique about this situation is that they're dealing directly, in some case, it sounds like from what I've read, with the NFL directly, which tells me that they're looking at other teams or making the package look so that there's another team that may be dissatisfied with where they are.
Well, Slay's been
come to St. Louis. And I think that's
because there's been some line of thought that Los Angeles is basically this mechanism for other NFL owners to basically extort their home cities into building a new stadium, because they could say, well, if you don't build me a new stadium, I'm going to go to Los Angeles. And maybe one of the reasons why it may not happen is other owners want to keep that mechanism in place to keep that possibility alive. But there is a possibility St. Louis could become that new mechanism. But a lot of people have told me it's just not as attractive as I'm going to be very honest here, a blackmail tool as LA is, essentially.
Well, because in California, there's the weather.
There is the weather. So we'll have to see. But
I think it is definitely necessary that we have some type of team here, whether it's the Rams or not. I think the sports fans in St. Louis will adjust. But I think having a team, whether it's Jacksonville Jaguars or it's the Rams or the Cardinals want to come back. I don't know.
I don't think that's happening.
Hey, I mean, well, you never
know?
know. I mean, heck, I was in Jacksonville several times 20 years ago when all this was coming down,
Yeah.
covering that stuff. Now, as a councilman, what do you see, though, as the top priority of what the county needs to do, either on the economic front or maybe there's some other front? What do you see as the top priority?
I think in the next 6 months to 8 months, maybe even a year, we've got to get the county on an even financial playing field. There's a lot of things that have come to light in the last couple months and years that need to be addressed from a financial standpoint. We can have all these great intentions on programs and this and that, but if we don't have the money or we're squandering it in computer deals and money missing and bad contracts, that money could have went to this program or that program or helped Ferguson or helped somewhere else. But in the meantime, we're spending time and effort in court and audits and tracking down where this money disappeared. And I brought with me, I don't know if you've seen it, is the they did
Visual
an audit,
aids.
did it, yeah. Follow along at home. The top 10. They went back and looked at top 10 contracts with St. Louis County and the overruns in these contracts. This is what this column here for those following along at home. These contracts added up to $1.3 million, and by the time the contract finally was awarded and everything was done with it, it turned out to be over $5 million.
Yeah, 5.9. So basically,
the
it's
total
about
of this and total of that.
almost 4 times.
Yeah, it's
At least 4 times.
340%
Yes,
higher.
correct.
And where that is, and you break it down by all these different programs, and you can see with cost overruns and add-ons. And my predecessor, Greg Quinn, was a big person that pushed back on these add-ons. We see these programs, they get started, and then suddenly they have unbelievable add-ons and change orders that just take a program that should be $2 million or whatever, and suddenly it's $5 million.
So
Now one of them, just to mention, $1.6 million was for gasoline delivered that had been allocated for $300,000. It was $1.9 million. But with the dropping gas prices, you may get some relief.
Maybe.
So we're going to have to leave it there. We'll have you next time to maybe talk
love
more
to.
about contracts.
Yeah, definitely.
That's great.
To follow all of our stories, that's stlpublicradio.org. You can follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. You can follow Joe at
J Mannies. That's JMANNIES.
I'm not sure you have a Twitter, do you?
I don't Twitter,
Well,
Whoa.
I think you've made.
but I do have Facebook.
Yeah. So
And I do have email.
So follow him on Facebook and send him an email. We'll be back next week. Until then, so long.